You're listening to Both Sides of the Stethoscope, where medicine meets the human heart. This podcast is hosted by me, Dr. Colby Salerno, a cardiologist, and my co-host, Dr. Aline Gregosian, an ICU doctor. What makes our podcast unique? We've both had heart transplants. Join us as we blend our medical expertise with personal journeys, aiming to educate and foster understanding between doctors and patients. From cutting-edge medical discussions to personal reflections, welcome to a podcast that explores the heartbeat of healthcare and the shared experience that connects us all. Let's get on with the episode. Welcome back to Both Sides of the Stethoscope podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Colby Salerno, here with my co-host, Dr. Aline Gregosian.
Hi, everyone.
We took some time off to do some other things, but we're back and excited for tonight's episode. We're going to be talking tonight as much as we can about xenotransplantation. We are certainly not experts in this field, but it is an interesting topic that we wanted to touch upon, give a little bit of our insight, and kind of talk about maybe where the future of this is going and why we find it, important for the field as a whole. So, Aline, I will kick it over to you to get started.
Yeah. So I guess, I'm definitely not an expert. In fact, I think people always assume that I'm a transplant doctor, and I'm not. Sure, I'm on the other side of things with organ donation, but of course we don't deal with xenotransplantation on that side. But it is something that's very interesting, and it's something that obviously interests me not only as a physician, but also as a heart transplant recipient. I guess we can get started with kind of the history of it. Now, I did some research before this. I actually listened to a podcast on Friday and then read some stuff about it today. So we prepare for these interviews with each other, by the way.
Exactly.
But basically, one of the things that I thought we could at least start with is kind of the history of xenotransplantation, right? So this is something that has always been talked about. If I'm not mistaken, didn't they do a baboon heart at some point in the 80s, right?
I just say it started in the 60s that they were doing this. Yeah.
And then, we kind of took a step back and it was something that seemed like we were never going to get there. And one of the reasons was because technology wasn't there. Immunosuppression at that time was very different from what it is now. Genetic, gene modification, that's also something that we're using with xenotransplantation. So I guess with the history of it is that we kind of put a pause to it. I'm talking like I'm doing all this, but scientists and doctors out there put a pause to it, kind of waited to see when it would be the best time to go back to xenotransplantation. And here we are. So what can you tell me about kind of what's been done so far? Or I guess, why don't we actually start with, what is xenotransplantation and what has been done so far?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great starting point. And I'll add by saying that I am a transplant doctor and still have, very, very limited knowledge about this because it's really being done at only, 3 centers come to mind off the top of my head: Maryland, NYU, and MGH. But I'm sure there's maybe a handful more, but that's it. This is not widespread. This is extremely rare and extremely still just at the very tip of the iceberg of where this is going to go. But first, xenotransplantation means taking a organ from an animal and transplanting it into a human. And actually, not totally what it means. It means kind of from one species into another. Because xenotransplantation also covers, for example, they have trialed pig hearts in chimpanzees as they study this because they like to use chimpanzees as kind of the model of the non-human primate model of kind of something that's similar to us. And that is why initially that was the thought was to use organs from primates, which are the most similar to us through evolution, and see if that would work. And then it turned out it did not. One of the cases in the 60s, the patient died after 2 hours. And then things continued to go wrong, a lot of it due to virus transmission from chimps to humans. And eventually they said we cannot allow this anymore. And then it picked back up with pigs. And it mostly picked back up with pigs for a few reasons. The first is because of the ability for pigs to grow fast. for them, like within a year, to get organs that would be compatible with humans. And then because of, like Aline said, the gene editing capabilities that we have developed over the years now, where we have been able to go in and edit these organs so that they are more compatible to be transplanted into a human. Um, and I think that's kind of where we're at now. And like I said, pigs kind of came to the forefront because of the logistics, really, of the ability to use them. And then the gene editing and this stuff is kind of just where that is what's being used. And I think that is where the future of this will continue to stay in, unless we develop something significantly better, which I don't even have a hypothetical, but maybe there's another
Right.
animal
Well,
or
maybe
something in it.
maintain. Yeah. And I guess another, so that's, what we're trying to solve, which is another thing. Like, why are we even doing this? There's a lot of, animal rights groups, things like that. There are people who have ethical concerns, and honestly, the why behind why this is happening is because we are in need of organ transplants. There are plenty of people who die every day waiting for an organ transplant. So this is supposed to solve one of those issues. Does it mean that people are going to live, decades with a pig heart? Possibly. Or sometimes it could mean that it could be a bridge to an organ, right? To a human organ. And so, what problem it's actually trying to solve is the fact that we are in need of organs, and there's plenty of people waiting right now for transplants who aren't getting them. And if there's somebody who's, for example, getting dialyzed or on dialysis, um, a few times a week, they would rather just try things out with a non-human organ transplant than wait 7 years on the waiting list. Then, this is kind of what that's trying to solve, for those of you who are wondering. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, just to add, right, is um, with the initiation, or not the initiation, with the use of donation after circulatory death, increasing the donor pool over the last year, like increased it by over 1,000 donors. However, the number of people needing transplants still outpaced that
Oh, it does.
number.
Mhm.
So, there's people still dying on the list waiting for transplant. And so that is why people have looked to see, are there other options? And so I think we'll speak first about hearts, and then go into the other organs. And the reason that I think hearts is really important to touch upon is because, good or bad, with kidneys, for example, if the kidney fails, you can go back on dialysis. If the new heart fails, there's no out. You die
Well,
from that.
I've heard that, but how about like an LVAD? Is it difficult to go? I guess it would be difficult to like put a human heart back in and an LVAD, right? Is that kind of the issue with hearts not having a backup system?
Yeah, I mean, if you use an LVAD, you technically can recover the heart to a point to get the LVAD out. But if you're talking once a pig heart is in, could you then put a patient on an LVAD? The answer would be no. If the LVAD is
Right.
something that needs to be done, you could put them on ECMO. But we know that that is just a short term, not leave the hospital option, as opposed to dialysis, where you could go home and go back on your dialysis schedule, which we'll talk about, because that's what happened with one of the patients who got a xenotransplantation kidney. Um, but for the hearts, I think most of the data right now is coming out of the two main cases that were done at the University of Maryland, um, where those patients lived 40 days and 60 days post. And I think one of the most important things to know is that these were patients that were deemed not candidates for advanced therapies. So, for whatever reason, they were felt that they eh, could not get an LVAD or a human heart transplant. And so they offered them this option, but this option was offered in what's called like a compassionate use way, meaning the, the doctors did the right thing. They told the patients, like, we have no idea how this is going to go. You may die right away in the OR. And the patients took on that risk, and really, in a way, extremely, honorable way, because they knew they were just doing this as kind of a, um, donation to society and to medical research. That's really what they ended up being, was research subjects, knowing that the likelihood of it being successful is very low. And because of this, the first thing you worry about when the heart goes in is what's called hyperacute rejection. And that's where the heart goes in and you instantly see it just dying right in front of you as soon as the blood flows into the heart, it starts to like turn black and die. And they did a lot of studies prior to even trialing this, where they tried it in pigs donating to primates and made sure that they really removed the likelihood of hyperacute rejection. So neither of these patients had hyperacute rejection, but they both died of at least some part due to antibody mediated rejection, and their donor hearts failed. The pig donor hearts failed. And I think that's the biggest concern as we move forward in this, is how do we get our human bodies not to attack pig hearts?
And the way they started doing this, well, first of all, I also want to mention how important it is for these patients who subjected themselves to something that had never been done. It's extremely honorable, and it's something that means a lot to those of us, in the medical field. Very well knowing that they could have died on the operating table. Both of them ended up dying, a few, I think, like you said, 60-ish days later. But it was something that was very honorable, and we really, really appreciate everything that's been done because of these patients. So, with that being said, the hyperacute rejection could also happen in just regular organ transplantation, right? Human to human. It's not something that's only seen in, right.
Exactly.
And so, but we were not sure about the risk of this in, for example, the porcine xenotransplantation, because of it's never happened before. But it is a risk that we take with human to human organ transplantation as well. Um, so there's been two cases. I have it up here. So University of Maryland did both. And the first one, they actually initially thought had died of porcine CMV, but that was not the case. It was actually rejection, correct?
Correct. They
And
for it sounds like for a couple of years they thought that, and then it was proven that was not the
yeah,
case.
right. And then are they at higher risk for certain infections, or do we not know that yet?
There's infections that animals carry that can be more harmful to humans. And the idea is, can these viruses, mostly not like a bacterial concern, but a viral concern, be deep within the endothelial cells of these transplanted organs? And if they are, how are we going to handle that? And, just taking a detour here, one of the patients who got a kidney had had her own infection, and then because of that, they had to reduce her immunosuppression, um, and then she rejected the kidney. So it's like, no matter even what we do, whether it's an infection coming from the organ that's being donated, or even just infections we deal with, it's changing how we can handle immunosuppression, and that changes how we handle donor organs. So I do not know off the top of my head. I know like the chimpanzee xenotransplantation that was done early on had major issues with viral illnesses, transferring from chimps to humans. It sounds like they're doing a very good job of eliminating that right now, but it's always going to be a concern, especially we're putting these organs into immunocompromised humans to begin with. So if a animal viral infection is able to spread, it could be deadly very quickly.
Right, right. Um, how much do you know about the gene editing portion? Do you know what they do?
I know a little bit, right? So through the use of things like CRISPR, where you can go in and edit genes, they have two companies, it sounds like, that are able to do this and are focused on xenotransplantation. And they do gene editing, and you can either subtract, we'll say pig genes, right, from the pig organ, or you can add human genes to the pig organ to try and increase the compatibility to this. And again, this is where my knowledge is limited, but the idea is that there's a one type that does a 10 gene edited version of an organ, which is like 6 deletions and 4 additions. And then really drastically sounding, which is interesting, and this is where, I think expert would be able to speak better. This is one that's a 69 gene edited organ, and that one I do not know the numbers of deletions and additions, but it's such a vast difference in the numbers. It'd be interesting to know if that's significantly different, or if it's just kind of the way the two companies do things. Um, Interestingly, it's kind of what's looked at for all of the transplant people out there who do cell-free DNA studies and stuff, where we go get our blood draw and can do this through like Natera or CareDx. They also have very drastically different number of genes and things that they look at, and it seems like they're very similar in terms of efficacy, though. So that may be the same thing with pig organs.
That's really interesting. I do wonder if they're ever gonna have, I mean, there haven't been enough patients who have undergone this, but I assume eventually they're gonna do, like, head-to-head, studies to see which one does better eventually. Um,
Yeah.
I guess another thing that we can touch on is we talked about kind of the risks, right? The hyperacute rejection, the infection risk, and the fact that this hasn't been done that often. We talked about a little bit of the gene editing. How about why don't we touch on which organs are people looking at to actually do xenotransplantation with? Hearts, kidneys, livers? Is liver something?
That's the only 3 that I'm aware of, are hearts, livers, and kidneys. Um, the podcast that you shared with me, was interesting in terms of the, case that they shared where a patient in, China
Yeah,
had
that's right.
a partial liver resection of themselves. Then they had a pig liver implanted, and then that pig liver allowed the old portion of the patient's liver to grow, and then the pig liver portion failed. But by the time they removed it, the real liver, which has the ability to grow, it's one of our only organs that can do that, had recovered to the point that when the pig liver came out, the human liver was now good enough to be successful, and that patient
Yeah,
is still alive. Um, Obviously, the only organ you can do that with is the liver. So it's really incredible. And that one seems, if you can do it that way, that seems obviously like the leading, if there was a race, the liver option seems like it's leading the race because of how impressive that is. Because now it's like the patient got their own liver back. Like you don't even have to
yeah,
worry about immunosuppression, um, which is
yeah. I do remember.
incredible. So,
Crazy. I was gonna say the stuff that people are doing out there is just insane.
yeah. And, Aline and I are really good at just kind of going all over the place when we chat. So, um, talking also kind of about people who have dedicated their lives to science. The other way that this is being studied is people who are brain dead have donated their bodies to science. And so what they're doing is they are transplanting these pig organs into brain dead humans. And so brain death is equal to real death. And in the medical field and just in the United States in general. Um, and what's really, again, honorable is that these people have donated their bodies and were able to study how these organs react to human physiological conditions. And again, kind of watch, do they reject? They've done it with kidneys. They're watching to see, are the kidneys making urine? Are the kidneys rejecting? And they actually have them like in these clear plastic covering, so they can literally see the kidney
Yeah, that's really
visibly while this is all happening. It's a little sci-fi, I got to admit, um, but I think it's again, people are just trying to find ways, especially if you think about kidneys. The transplant list for kidneys is exceedingly long, and they're working towards trying to find a way to give these people other options.
exactly. And the reason why I'm just reading about it here. The brain dead, they've only done, it says 6 to 8 cases. And what they do with these brain dead humans is once they get the kidney in, one of the ways you could tell if a kidney is working is obviously blood flow to the kidney and then the urine production. And so they did this initially just to see if it's even feasible, and it was. It's possible now. And so now with these studies, they're going to go on and see what else we can do. But I agree with you. It's incredible that these people have donated their bodies to science to see if this is even a possibility for us, which is amazing. And by the way, it does look like, so it said Mass Gen, University of Maryland, and then also University of Alabama. They've been doing xenotransplantation, which I didn't know about, and NYU. So these are some of the hospitals that are doing this. NYU is doing the brain dead human research, and it's incredible. And then the liver case was in China. You were correct.
Mhm. Which I imagine would be headed our way soon. We do know with current situation, the just a question of grant
Fun.
money and
Yeah.
research options and funding that it's unclear kind of how much this will pick up over the next 3+ years. Um, I think the other thing to touch upon is kind of how close are we to having this as an option for people. Um, no clue, but I would put us in the possibly see it in our lifetime category. Um,
I agree with that
and
for sure. 10 to 20 years is my guesstimate. And again,
yeah,
I personally, this is my opinion, I personally don't think it'll be something that people are gonna be able to live with for a long time, but I do think it's gonna be a good bridging option. Now, we'll see in a few years what actually happens, but that's my guess. Because, organ transplantation itself, there's just so much that goes into it, and the physiology of, like, a human to human organ transplant is obviously gonna, at this point be superior, even if we do gene editing. Now, I might be wrong, but I do think it might be more of a bridging option, but we'll see. But I also agree with you. It's gonna be in our lifetime for sure.
yeah.
Um, I do have a question for you, and I think we could both answer this, but take would you undergo xenotransplantation if they asked you and you had no other options?
Um, so the answer, right, is twofold. The first is, would I take one right now if I needed a transplant and I'm a transplant candidate? The answer is absolutely not. Um, right. If you are a transplant candidate and they're like, here's your two options, it's like you shouldn't, they wouldn't even offer you this, right? Because
Exactly.
it's not
Yeah.
at that point. But that being said, I have already, I'm totally of the thought process. Of course, I would help the medical field. Um, and so if
Agreed.
I was at a point where they're like, you can't get an LVAD, you cannot get a transplant, would you want xenotransplantation? Then yes, I would take that option and kind of see what happens, knowing full well, at least in 2025, almost 2026, the likelihood is I would die relatively quickly. But that's just
Right.
my
I
sacrifice to
agree with you,
science.
though. That was exactly. We've already sacrificed our lives in medical school and residency, but why not a little more? I agree with you. Obviously, if it's the last option, I 100% would take it. But I do think we're getting closer and closer to having it be an actual option for more people. But we'll see where things go.
I will add that I would be much more likely to accept it as a kidney recipient. So going back, there was a patient who got a kidney, a xenotransplant kidney. It was doing well. She got an infection, or he got an infection, and they had to decrease the immunosuppression. So when they decreased the immunosuppression, her body rejected the kidney. I believe she had the kidney for like something in the 4 months time period. Then what they did was they just removed the kidney, and she went back on dialysis, and she's doing fine, and is still alive. So it's really different, right? That's what I was saying, is that there's no backup to just remove the transplanted heart and go on to some sort of thing that can take over that function. And so I think liver and kidney are coming way sooner than heart. Um, there's also unique
Heart. Yep.
anatomical issues with the heart that I found fascinating as a cardiologist, and that's that the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava come in at 90 degrees on a pig organ, and they come in straight on a human organ. There's other issues with the way the heart is like rotated, and some of the musculature in it. There's issues with how you would be able to ultrasound it and do an echocardiogram on a pig transplanted heart, which is interesting, where you'd have to possibly think about other imaging modalities as we move into the future. Like, would these patients need cardiac MRIs and things like that to be able to truly see how the anatomy is doing? That's the cardiology nerd in me. That is just like, how would we, end up doing that? But it also would change how you biopsy it, which would be a major thing. So right now, if you get a biopsy, you go straight through your internal jugular vein, right through your superior vena cava into your heart. If the superior vena cava is at a 90-degree angle, I have no idea how we would be trying to biopsy that. Maybe I'd be interested to know if the Maryland folks thought about that for these patients that they did this on.
Yeah.
But
I didn't even
that's
know.
just kind
That's
of,
crazy. That makes
yeah,
sense,
it's just a
though.
unique thing about it. Um, so again, we're not pretending like we're experts in this field. We just, being transplant recipients and physicians, of course, find it super interesting. And um, obviously, 10 years ago, we'll say 13 years ago, when I got my heart, I never even thought this would be like something to discuss,
Interesting.
which is crazy. I think the technology of gene editing that we're currently dealing with, and with how far we've come in 10 years, I think 10 more years from now, we may be having a whole different discussion.
I agree with that. I think it'll be here sooner rather than later. Of course, unless there's funding issues, which, there might be, but we'll see where things go. And Kobe, I agree with you in that, we're not experts in this, but we do want to start the discussions because we want people to know a little bit more about what's going on. And it's kind of the point of our podcast. We're trying to show everybody, both sides of the stethoscope. These are the conversations that are being had in the medical world. These are the things that people are talking about, the innovative things in organ transplantation that we're all very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, if the gene editing gets so good that rejection becomes a very low risk issue, then you completely remove the lack of donor situation that's causing people to die on the waiting list. It just doesn't become an issue anymore. Obviously, there's the ethical parts of pigs and animal rights and stuff like that. Obviously, um, I'm not going to touch upon that. I don't really.
Right, and just for people who wanna know what the ethical concerns are, is that we are growing these pigs in order to take their hearts, right? So this is what's happening, and so, of course, there's people who think, this is not okay, this is the animal rights and stuff like that come in. These are the ethical conversations that are also, you know, people are having these conversations as well with tons of ethicists and bioethical physicians, whatever, whoever they are out there. But it's something that people are definitely making sure is 100% okay, and something that it's something that we have to kind of go through if we are going to end up doing this. But those are the concerns: is that we are growing these pigs to take their organs.
Yeah. And whether, true or not, one of the physicians at Maryland was asked this question, and he said that overall, the public, um, he felt, was far more overwhelmingly positive towards this
Oscar, yeah, yeah.
than negative, um,
Which is good.
which I
I
found
thought people
interesting.
I thought people, general public would probably be against it, but from what he said, and we can also share that podcast episode in our notes as well if people want to do like a deeper dive. But what he
Mhm.
said was that the general public is actually much more positive and open to it than even he thought. And so that's really good.
Agreed. And so we will kind of wrap it up here. Like Aline said, we'll share that other podcast episode, which was an interview with one of the doctors at University of Maryland, who's part of the xenotransplant team there. Um, and it's a nice quick listen, 25 minutes. And then as this progressive, if anything major hits the news, maybe we'll come back and chat about it some more. But if you want, feel free to message us or email us any thoughts or questions or follow-up information you're looking for. If we don't know it, we can try and send you the resources that we kind of use to review all of this.
For sure.
Thanks for listening. Come back and
Thanks.
listen to the next episode, which will be out whenever. So, subscribe
We'll
or
have a
whatever,
better
so that way you get it.
schedule. Yeah. We'll have a
Yeah,
better
never
schedule
have a real schedule.
here. Right, right, right. But I feel like now, starting in January, at least 2026 is my goal, that we're gonna have a more scheduled way of doing this.
And really, I mean, the best thing to do is just follow us on Instagram because we always post there that a new
Yeah,
episode is out. So that way you'll always know that a new one came out.
exactly. Thanks all.
All right. Bye.